So, going to hand you over to Phil. So, Phil is President, Infrastructure Modernization Business Unit at Rocket Software. Phil Buckalow, please. It's over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mark. Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. There's still a few seats up front if a couple of you want to straggle up here. First of all, it's great to be here. Thank you all for coming. We're so excited about participating in this year's GSE. My name is Phil Buckalow. I lead the infrastructure modernization team at Rocket Software. I've been with Rocket for a couple of years now. Prior to that, I spent a couple of decades at IBM. And, you know, this space is a very important space to me. My introduction to the mainframe came in the early 1980s. My father was a COBOL programmer. He was very frustrated with COBOL of the time and of those days because it didn't have the structure. He really got angry with go-tos and if statements. And he set about trying to build his own version of the language, a structured COBOL, before there was a lot of structured COBOL back then. You can see there that he's got his command statements reference summary with his name Buck Buckalow on it. The launch of Logistar software was not commercially successful, but it certainly was a key part of my upbringing, and it's something that it's been a very strong part of my life. And so really great to be here in front of all of you, and hopefully we won't be doing any red pens on green and white screens, or green and white pages going forward. So I wanted to start for just a few minutes with a little bit about who Rocket Software is. We'll try to keep this pretty brief, and then we'll get into some data that we've been collecting on the industry, on some of what you and your peers are doing. Rocket Software is about 2,500, we call them Rocketeers these days. We're around the world. About 2/3 of our people are technical or engineers in nature, and we serve around 10,000 clients. We're going to be found in the big companies of the world, the top Fortune 50, the big banks, the airlines, the insurance companies, car manufacturers, and others. That's really where most of our client set is, where most of you are. You probably know, if you've been around this space for a while, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions over the years. Rocket's made up of around 60 different companies. The original products at Rocket were QMF. That's one Andy Eunice started around 30 years ago. And it's something that we've taken to market through our partnership with IBM. About 2.5 years ago, we acquired ASG. And so some of you will see some of the names that are familiar there. Zeek and Timon, Mobius, Lifecycle Manager, a few of those. There are a few other pieces that you will have probably know Rocket for through the course of our history as well. And we continue to make acquisitions. Earlier this year, we acquired KRI Resources. Ray Overby's here. We'll bring him up in a little bit later in the presentation. And then recently, we acquired another company I'll talk about in just a little bit. We also have a really strong partnership with IBM. We've been a development partner for IBM for, again, over 30 years. So those of you that work with the Omegamons, IMS tools, DB2 Connect and utilities, even SDSF or RMF, ZMFA, a lot of those different products, we make those products for IBM, and we assist in many aspects of the go-to-market. We'll have some presentations here. I know we've got some of the Omegamon folks here as well. So we're really excited about bringing innovation to market through our partnership with IBM. We've got more IBM champions than any other vendor, and again, 750 engineers that are dedicated to this space. We pride ourselves on the class of support, really working towards giving our clients the best possible support experience that we can. And again, we've got a very technical team, and that's really the foundation with over 100% retention rate. So now I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about the market, the space, and then I'll share some of the data that we've been collecting from some recent surveys. Obviously, there's a lot of different environmental variables that are impacting our market from customers. Customers are a lot more demanding, especially post-COVID. The need for more digital presence has really expanded. Competition is, especially in like banks and insurance companies with the growth of the fintechs, that's something that requires all of our clients to move a lot faster, to be a lot more agile than they have historically. The economy's down, at least the S&P, around 11% in the past 3 months. That's put some pressure on a number of your organizations and in the economy more broadly. There have been some layoffs that have been a challenge in some of the larger organizations. And staffing in itself, especially in this part of the industry, is one of the biggest challenges that we have, because there's a lot of folks that have been retiring out of the workforce, and that really puts a lot of pressure on us, the vendor community, as well as all of you, to deal with the fact that there's been an atrophy of skills in this part of the market. And then finally, technology. There's been a tremendous amount of technology innovation. I want to compliment IBM on the technology in the mainframe itself. It is technologically very mature, but there's also a lot of technological growth from GPUs and TPUs, all the as-a-service capabilities that are growing up in many of the public clouds, and that has really put a lot of pressure on the entities that we work with in order to be able to take advantage of that technology and use it in their markets. So this is a survey that we've run annually for every couple of years, where we try to get a pulse on the population of mainframe clients to understand kind of where are they in their journey. And you see over here, you know, we've got around 20%. It dropped down to 16%. We'll redo the survey in a couple of months, that are just operating as is. Almost no one is just operating their environment the way that they are today. Most of the people in the world today are trying to modernize and optimize in place. And we'll talk a lot about what that means to us. That's a big portion of kind of what the talk is about today. There's still 25%, 24% that are attempting to replatform or exit the mainframe in and of itself. And we wanted to better understand what was really driving that with these populations. So you see on the right, we asked a bunch of questions around what's compelling you to move off. The most popular answer was their boss told them to. You know, directives from some probably ill-informed C-suite member that tells them that they need to move to the cloud or something else. That's not the greatest reason in the world, obviously. The need for more flexibility is an important reason, and that's why it's incumbent on all of us to make the environments that we work in with the mainframe much more flexible and agile. Obviously, knowledge gaps, the skills challenges that exist, as well as budgetary reasons. You know, this is a concern from many clients in the industry. You know, there have been price increases from a number of the vendors in this space, and that's something we all have to be cognizant of, because it puts pressure on the environment that we work in as well. So with that, we tried to look at, okay, so what about some of these companies that have been trying to replatform off? Some of you might be familiar, especially in the UK here, with TSB Bank. In 2018, they embarked upon a journey to leave the mainframe after they had to spend around £32 million just to compensate their suffering customers. Then the regulators came over the top and hammered them with another £49 million fine. Because they didn't have material controls in the process. So this can be a very, very disruptive approach to try and leave. I believe their CEO was fired. There was a lot of pain and suffering that was involved with this kind of a move. So it's something that we urge our clients to not to tread into lightly. We believe there's a better way. We believe you can have modernization without disruption. That's really the tagline that we've been promoting, and it's something that we believe in firmly because we believe there is plenty of opportunity to modernize. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. Before my current role, I spent about 5 years leading the public cloud for IBM. And that meant driving a lot of the work that we did with full as-a-service offerings, databases as a service, containers as a service. I actually led the object storage team. So I got to see and feel and compete with AWS and Azure and GCP, all of these really big giants in the space. And I got to see kind of up close and personal what the clouds are really good at. And the fact is that the clouds are very good at certain things. But at the same time, the mainframe is also very good at certain things. And so ultimately, we believe that you can have the best of both worlds, and that a hybrid approach to modernization is going to be the best approach for far and away the bulk of our clients. In terms of a little bit about more of these kind of strengths and weaknesses, the mainframe is really good at, obviously, reliability, availability, security, scalability in those scale-up types of use cases. There's a lot of capabilities built in around low latency, high throughput, but also there's decades of change management. Regulators have been crawling all over these environments. MRAs have forced change into clients, and therefore there's a very good operating model that exists there. At the same time, mainframes are not always good at scale out. We've had historically challenges with agility. Most of the application development over the decades has been waterfall versus some type of agile or modern CI/CD process. And it's often that some of these teams are siloed from the rest of IT, in addition to the challenges on the skill set side. The clouds, on the other side, are really good at elastically scaling out. If you've got a workload where you need 1,000 virtual servers and you need to just hammer away at certain data and then you're going to collapse it and go away, clouds are really going to be the best place for this. There's also a ton of work going into hardware specialization. That includes warm caches for storage, but also specialized processors like GPUs, and Google has TPUs that are all oriented towards a lot of these modern Gen AI types of use cases where you've got to do a lot of machine learning and you need the specialized processors. Most of the innovation at the chip level and at the GPU level is happening on public clouds. Clouds are also really good at velocity and being able to have a lot of skills come in as well that are already trained coming out of university with all of these, modern skills around data science, machine learning. They're all trained on these as-a-service offerings that exist in the cloud. At the same time, the clouds often struggle with things like a variable latency. Noisy neighbor problems are still an issue in many types of cloud environments. There's also can be lots of cybersecurity issues if you don't lock down the clouds correctly. They can be securable, but there's a lot of extra steps and different steps that are needed. And then problem resolution in that kind of a distributed architecture can be very challenging as well. So again, we believe mainframes are really good at those high throughput transaction processing type workloads, and the clouds are really good at the scale out type workloads. So things like analytics and machine learning, that can actually work really well in those cloud environments. In order to facilitate that, though, clients need to be able to virtualize or access some of that key transactional database data, or be able to move it into the clouds for the purposes of a lot of those analytic workloads. So to make it a little deeper technically, this probably doesn't get me to 3 chilies to your level, Mark, but you can see over here we've got kind of the mainframe environment. Obviously, we believe you need hyper-automation or automation really across all aspects of this type of solution. And you see the cloud over here to the right. We believe you can virtualize data or be able to access data either through data virtualization, or you can even do API calls if needed, to be able to collect that mainframe data and bring it back to the cloud. At the same time, there will be certain use cases where you need to sync, where you need to replicate and keep in sync certain subsets of the data. If you're going to hammer that data over and over consistently, or you've got model training efforts where you need to be able to access and run across with various levels of compute that data at various times from a public cloud, then being able to sync that data is something that's going to be really important. And that's something that we, and I know some of the other vendors here, have invested in. So that's our general point of view. We think that you can benefit from the capabilities of the mainframe and the capabilities of the public cloud without going through a massive replatforming, lift and shift disruptive migration that could put you in the same dire straits as TSB. That in fact you can get the benefits of both worlds of having your data safe and sound in transactions on the mainframe, but also being able to leverage the capabilities of the public cloud. The question is, how do you do it? How do you do it across the stack? And here we believe there are capabilities really up and down the stack. First of all, in the app dev and DevOps space, there's a lot of companies that have been investing in and determining how they can make their mainframe application development environments more agile. Building in DevSecOps componentry so that in many ways you're just making the mainframe environment look more and more like your other distributed environments. On the automation side, being able to have tools that can let you coordinate and automate workloads that now will span both sides from public clouds or private clouds back into that mainframe environment is critical. Content management, this is an area where we have some offerings that can live with repos that exist on the mainframe, but can also have some of those same repos begin to coexist on public clouds as well. Data integration is an important area. I'll talk about it in a minute. Obviously, being able to benefit from what public clouds, they have really cheap object storage, what they can provide on the storage side, and there's a few solutions from the vendor communities in that area as well. Across all of these, you've got to continue to be cognizant of performance management, looking at tools that will help save MIPS, basically, to help pay for some of these initiatives is also a key element. And then we'll talk quite a bit more about security as we go through the rest of the discussion. So many of you are familiar with Zoe. Zoe is increasing in popularity. It's an open source capability that initially was brought to market with the help of Broadcom, IBM, and Rocket. And it's something that we're proud to be a strong participant in. We think Zoe is something that can help you to have your mainframe world look and appeal to those younger generations because there's more exposure to CLIs or APIs or modern user interfaces that people coming out of school are going to be more familiar working with than the ISPF panels or the green screens. It's something that we're excited about. I think all vendors have added a little bit of extra spice on top of their Zoe support contracts. We added a process manager and a file manager to ours. Those are things that are add-ons that we'll provide. And I know some of the other vendors have done the same with their Zoe offerings. This is another area that is really important and that we've gotten a lot of interest, both from a compliance angle, but as well from a DevOps angle. Many companies, as you try to make your mainframe look and behave more like the rest of your environment, you're often going to be able to need different pieces of open source, often glue, to help be able to stitch things together. Things like Bash and curl and make and GitHub clients that run natively on ZOS. And so being able to port these packages and support these packages for you if you go into production is something that a lot of clients are considering, because you want to make these CI/CD pipelines. In order to make them work, you got to be able to have some of that open source componentry run on the mainframe itself. And so this is something that we're big advocates for, and we think most companies will need to embrace. I want to make a point around performance and optimization here. Just as you take lots of different ways that the mainframe is operating and make it look more distributed, it's important to do that in some of your applications. This is an example of a KICS profiler. So bringing some more modern tools to help look at application services providing organizations and capabilities like KICS. This is something that can help you to identify trouble spots. What's really important is that everyone continues to push on us, the vendor community, to help give you tools that lower the skills threshold to being successful. This is an example of where we've helped clients there's a lot of clients that have come to us and said, look, I've only got 1 or 2 senior KICS admins left in my organization because a few of them have retired. So what they need tools that can help them have their more junior admins, KICS admins, to be able to help isolate or find the problem so that those few really super scarce resources they've got that can fix the KICS problems can spend their time, their precious time, focused on the right thing. And so that's something that's really important for all of us, is to lower the skills threshold so that people that are newer in their careers and newer to the mainframe can be successful in optimizing some of these solutions. Now I want to talk a little bit about data, because this is a really important part of that hybrid cloud story that I mentioned before. We think that you need to be able to have a couple of capabilities if you're going to navigate this hybrid data environment. Obviously, you need to be able to understand the data. Rocket, IBM, others, there's a number of tools out there that exist that help you do things like static code analysis to see what's talking to what's the lineage of certain aspects of the data, and being able to map that out. That's a good place to start. I mentioned virtualization. This is the ability to have a SQL call over from a cloud environment or a cloud application in some way, be able to access data that exists back on the mainframe itself. If the data intelligence environment is more about mapping metadata, virtualization is about actually querying different pieces of data and bringing it back. And then there's replication and sync. This is needed in those situations where you've got to have a near real-time replica of what's happening on your mainframe over in a cloud environment for certain use cases or for things like AI or ML. And then finally, being able to archive to the cloud. Rocket and several other vendors have some archive solutions, which are primarily oriented against saving money on tape and VTLs by being able to leverage low-cost object storage. To dive just a little bit deeper, this is an example of how you can take tools that can scan those environments to see what are the relationships between all of those vSAN files and IMS files to understand how they all map together. This is also useful with the regulators to map lineage, but it's also an important step to anyone that's embarking upon a hybrid cloud journey is to first understand your data and then to be able to address that data through REST APIs or through other access methods from off the mainframe. A lot of clients have a lot of use cases where they need to keep the data on the mainframes themselves for data resiliency or data residency, more likely, type requirements, but they still need to be able to access it from elsewhere. So in situations where that is your requirement, then virtualization is typically a good solution rather than building some kind of a custom ETL. Most recently, IBM acquired BOSS Technology. This was a small company based outside of Munich, Germany. They have a product called TC Vision, which has been in market for well over a decade. Most of you that may have heard of it if you've been in and around German-speaking markets because they were based in Munich. That's where most of their sales and deployments have been. But it's technology that we felt Rocket needed to be able to help us address that hybrid cloud use case of being able to replicate and sync data. And essentially, the big idea here is to start with the mainframe with a lot of different mainframe data sources. Many of you have probably got older applications running on things like Database or IDMS, Datacom. Obviously, being able to access vSAN files is something that is very tricky and can be very difficult to map. And that's something that's really an important step to anyone that wants to use that hybrid cloud approach. Being able to do all of your transformations of those data off of the mainframe is really important because if you don't, then you're going to burn a lot of MIPS by using those GP, general processor cycles, back on the mainframe. At the same time, because there's so much pressure on privacy, security, you need to be able to filter that data. So having filtering to be able to eliminate PII or other data as you replicate it and sync it over to these targets on the public cloud or on the open system side, that's a really important part of the initiative. I'm sure most of our clients in the room are getting pressure from their business to land something on Azure SQL or RDS Postgres on AWS or in Cosmos or Aurora or S3 with open formats. Those are all the different types of targets in addition to Kafka, which can kind of open up the rest of the world, that are being asked for by a lot of these distributed teams and these cloud teams that really need to be able to get to access some of the mainframe data. By putting in a solution like this, we believe you will actually preserve the longevity of the mainframe because you're allowing for coexistence. You can keep your transactions running on the mainframe as they always have been and keep those security profiles and all of that stuff in place and offload anything that's needed to be working with those new AI models, for example. And that's something that obviously as those models are created, we're still big believers in the Telum chip that runs on the mainframe side to be able to do the inferencing. So in many ways, this is being able to do training out here and inferencing over there. And that's a common pattern that we're starting to see with a lot of our clients. In addition to being able to obviously provide the technical solutions, being able to do the deployments, this is one of the references with Vic Roads. This is Victoria, the state of Victoria. This is a lot of their driver's license and being able to register your car type capabilities. In Australia, one of our business partners, CCA, they may have someone in the room. They, for example, worked with the BOSS team, installed this product. It took VSAM, IMS, and DB2 ZOS data, and was able to replicate it over to Azure SQL. They're working on AWS Postgres right now. And so those are the types of examples where you can coexist, and that allows you to be able to improve your customer experience by leveraging some of those cloud capabilities while continuing to keep the operational and the transactional discipline that's always been in place back on the mainframe. This is another example of a space that is really pretty hot these days. Being able to take your backup data or the data from the mainframe where you need to have archives, and instead of piping it over to tape environments or to VTL environments, if you're running tape or VTL subscale, if you're running it at massive scale, you can still have some really great cost points. But if you're running it at subscale, then that can be something that's really pricey. Today's object storage, if you look at like Deep Glacier on AWS, it's less than $2 per terabyte per month. And that can be, Deep Glacier, it typically is worn data, write once, read never often, that you just need to preserve for the regulators in an archive type scenario. You can also occasionally bring it back in a real disaster type scenario. Those are the examples where this use case can take place. I want to make a point here, though, because a lot of the vendors have tried to, some of the vendors have tried to convey that you can take storage data and use it for analytical purposes. And while that may be technically true, it's a massive lift. You need to be able to do the mapping of that data, like we talked about back here, before the data is synced to the mainframe. If you don't do it until after you take storage data is going to be compressed, it's deduped, it's shredded, it's built for tape environments where you only put the incrementals across. You do a full and then you do incrementals. And so it's not only does it have the storage properties of compression and deduplication, it's still sitting in EPSIDIC, it's in VSAM files that haven't been flattened or haven't been mapped to a relational environment. So if you need to be using the data for real analytical purposes, like you would after having landed in a relational database on the cloud, then that's something where you really need to look for a vendor solution that can help you do that sync in real time, or to be able to do the mapping layer prior to having landed big blobs of storage in an object storage. But if you're just focused on the use case for deep archive and being able to save yourself some tape and VTL costs, then this can be a really good solution for you. A few other areas before I try to get some friends on stage here to talk a little bit about security. Being able to do modern performance. This is an area where I think ourselves and a lot of the other investors are investing, or a lot of the other vendors are investing, and it's something that you as clients should continue to ask for. Being able to take more capabilities for AI and ML and put it into the monitoring suites, this is another example of the kinds of things that we can do to lower the skills threshold, so that you don't need to have a genius to figure out what these 15 different metrics mean from 15 different subsystems, but AI and other capabilities are used to help you, better understand and do the root cause analysis. I think this screenshot's an example of some of the work we've done with IBM and the Omegamons. This is a good serious investment opportunity for us, and something that we think will drive a lot of benefit for all of you. Now I wanted to pivot a bit and talk a little bit about security, and the rest of the session will be focused on security, because we, as well as I think I've seen from some of the other vendors, have done some surveys lately around the biggest concern area for their mainframes, and it's really in this security space. So we did some research of around 250 execs. This was IT directors and VPs at leading companies with over 1,000 people in the US and I think 6 countries in Europe. And we asked them how comfortable they were with the security environment that they have on their mainframe. Only 28% said that they were extremely confident with what they're doing. That means there's a lot of doubt. The rest of gray that you see on that circle over there is people that feel like, well, we're doing some things in the mainframe, but we should be doing a lot more things in order to make our environment as secure. In many ways, the mainframe has benefited from being in this isolated glass house, separated away from everything else. But those walls have come to break down, especially as you expose your data and you expose APIs to those transactions. Having the mainframe start to look and feel and act like the other parts of your environment, that's something that really becomes critical. So we said, what are the types of things that you're doing to try and help your organization? And these were some of the replies. More than 2/3 are doing data and system access. That would be pretty hard not to do in your mainframe environment. User authentication and access controls were next. Only 56% of the respondents said they were doing encryption both at rest and in flight. And then only 50% were doing vulnerability testing. We'll probably talk about in a minute, but there's requirements, especially in Europe with DORA and what's coming in January 2025, where you're compelled to do those scans of your environment, at least annually. Being able to have DevSecOps, only 44% were doing penetration testing. This is another area where everyone's got to get a lot more focus to doing all of these things that you've done on your mainframe and all on your distributed environment, to doing that on your mainframe as well. And that's really, in many ways, part of what I think the industry is going to be working on over the next year. So we have, as I mentioned before, we recently acquired a company called KRI. That does a lot of different capabilities in the security space. One of the most important things that we think you need to do is scanning your mainframe. I'm looking for programs that are running in authorized spaces and trying to better understand what type of vulnerabilities you have. I won't try to explain too much more than that since we have Ray here. But I really think that this is something that is important for everyone to continue to look at and to take very seriously as you go forward. So with that, I would like to invite a couple of our partners and friends up on the stage to talk a little bit more about the security space. So we've got a panel of, first of all, Ray Overby, who I mentioned, who was one of the co-founders of KRI Resources, which Rocket recently acquired. And we've also got Brian Marshall, who's the chief strategist of one of our strong partners, Vanguard Integrity Professionals. And Milt Rosberg is also the VP of Global Sales and Marketing at Vanguard as well.
Is this on?
Yeah.
You guys can hear me? I'm the good-looking one of the three. And yes, I am standing up.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the commentary. All right, so what I thought we would do here is just spend a few minutes and have you guys give us a little bit of your view of kind of the state of mainframe security today. Milt was, kind enough to pull together one of the charts that they've been using.
Yeah, that was Milt, wasn't it, Milt?
That they've been using with some of their clients on some of the key focus areas. But let me open it up, first of all, to you three guys. These are, most of you probably have known Brian or Milt or Ray for some time. They're some of the leading experts in the mainframe security space in the world, and I'm so happy to have them here today. So take it away. Let us know where you think the state of the world is today.
So the state of the world, it could be better. It could be a lot better. Unfortunately, today, as we go out and assess environments, we tend to find that almost every environment, actually not almost every single environment we do a penetration test on, we are successful in taking a normal ID and elevating it to the point that we can take over the system. We've never not been able to do that. The reality is that people are looking at basically the low-hanging fruit and able to pick that off. But as they start picking that off, we just move up the tree a bit and start grabbing other pieces of fruit. USS security, forget about it. People don't understand that APF authorization can be done in the USS side, or they don't understand, well, that's over on the USS side. I can't get to the ZOS side from there, can I? Ray, you want to add something?
I would concur. Pretty much every time we go into a client and we start looking at stuff, they have 30 or 40 years of aggregation of security data. I guess I don't talk loud. And you know, they're not spending the time and the due diligence to do what they need to do, right? It's not like the old days where you can kind of just wait for the phone call and say, okay, when there's a problem, I'll go deal with it, right? These days, if you're not actively looking for trouble and problems in your environment, it's going to be too late once you do have the problem.
And I'm going to let Bill speak here for a minute, because otherwise I'll hog the mic. Go ahead, Bill.
One of the things that we find we meet with our clients at the C-level is the first question they ask is how much, right? The biggest issue they're trying to solve is how can I get more security for less money? So there's really two ways to look at it. One is you can leave exactly what you have, not replace anything, do a risk analysis, and say, I'll take the chance. That's not a good idea, is it? Not really. So in the chart that you showed, which was great, a lot of these decisions on what they're going to do with their systems is coming from the top down. I think the largest percentage was. Then the next big concern is the budget money. Where are they going to get the money? So as a supplier and a vendor that's been doing this for over 30 years, it's important that we look at not rip and replace, because you don't have enough resources to rip and replace, but how can you augment it and add things to help them get the kind of results they need?
30 years? I've been doing this for 30 years. Come on. Yeah, over.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question. So obviously, I think the folks in the room are probably paying a lot of attention to DORA because of the fact that it went into law.
Is that the Explorer?
No. You're going to need to be an explorer.
Well, the young kids back there, they understood what I just said.
So maybe give us your thoughts on how that might change the landscape, and what do the folks in the room need to be thinking about, need to be planning, need to be doing. Obviously, it comes into force here in January 2025. And so how are all of you advising the clients that you talk to on how to prepare for it?
So one of the first things we're doing is we're working on automated patch management, automated scanning, and other areas of DORA that will help, or other areas to help with DORA compliance. So one of the big things that we're looking at right now is the idea that, and I'm going to talk about this in my session later today, but a patch Tuesday for the mainframe. Think about it. Yeah. We need that.
One of the problems with patching in our environment, if it's anything like it is in the States, it may take 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 18 months to apply a patch, roll it through all the different res cloning processes to finally get it into all of your production systems, right? And as our friends in the other environments know, they usually have 28 to 48 hours to apply a patch. We as an industry simply cannot match that at all. I mean, there's going to have to be some fundamental changes in how we do our, or the systems people do their day-to-day work. It has to change, right?
Yeah, so what happens in a real world environment when you get clients that have, let's just say, 20 to 140 LPARs, how do you do the patches? How do you make sure they're correct? How do you get them implemented in time? It's one of the places the auditors are driving the IT people crazy. And we just came back from a SAC event in Ireland, and one of the points that the auditors brought up is that people are not making the patches like they should in a timely fashion in a ZOS environment. So the auditor comes in and says, we can't wait 18 months, 12 months, 6 months. It's gone from all that time to a quarter, and some of the clients actually have to do it on a very regular basis. This introduces a whole nother environment, which is a great area of study. Which is the most important patch? Who makes that decision, and what is the risk analysis for it? So it's a place that we all in a ZOS environment need to pay close attention to, because it impacts the whole business, really.
Sorry. And speaking about patches, the way things work, right? If you put your SysProg hat on, patches that are hyper and above, right, are on all the SysProg's radar, right? The operations side of the house, whose motto is, if it's not broke, let's not fix it, right? They'll put the hypers on automatically, but the integrity problems, right, are at a lower level, and those don't always get applied, right? Because they don't have enough information to say, gee, if I put this patch on, not only will I lose my bonus and my boss's bonus if something breaks, like what things break when you put a patch on, right? They have no argument to say, okay, we need to be proactive to put these integrity vulnerabilities on, right? It's starting to change. There's CVSS scores now from the various vendors and things like that, but unfortunately for most mainframe people, especially us older ones, the CVSS scoring doesn't have really any resonance, right? So that's a there's no incentive for the industry for us to put on patches that are marked as integrity, because it's just the way the system works, right? So again, as an industry, these are things that we need to address so that patching can be done more timely.
I was trying to talk about Sam.
Let me just make a quick comment on that. So patching is something that obviously we got a lot of feedback with. I don't know how many people here lived through Log4j. Anybody have those scars like I did? I lost a whole holiday vacation over Log4j one year. That's the kind of thing that obviously, as you see more and more open source pervade and find its way onto the mainframe, that can be a really tough scenario. And so I would encourage all of you to go check your mainframes and look and see if there's any open source on there that you're not backed by a vendor contract on. Obviously, that's a business that we're in, but having felt that reality, if you don't have somebody that can fix that code, then you're waiting on the open source community to be able to fix not only the code in the underlying open source, but then to port it to ZOS and to be able to give you a patch. And that could be a really bad situation. So all of the regulators are typically saying, look, anything that's running in production has to be backed by a support contract from somewhere. So from us, from someone else, you need to be able to make sure that you've got those teams that are backing you up so that, on December 19th, that they can come in and make those fixes quickly according to their SLA and get you updated code so that you can put it in production. Any other comments on, I think compliance is obviously an important area. It's not just DORA. It seems that we've seen an uptick. I don't know if you guys have as well, Milton, Brian, in terms of clients. I think there was a new PCI, Jeff, you were talking about it, some of the new PCI standards that have forced more pen testing and than you've historically been doing on your mainframe. That's another thing to look at.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The penetration testing should be done on all platforms across the board on at least an annual basis. There's at least one or two or three compliance regulations that you all must follow that are dictating that at this point. And we're still seeing a small number of organizations. It hasn't ramped up to the 100% yet. And the same thing is true with MFA, even though that's gotten a lot better in our side of the industry over the last couple of years. But just a few years ago, I remember talking to a very large telecom in the United States. And when I say very large, I mean one of the largest. And when they started talking about MFA, their CIO ultimately said, you know what, we really don't need multi-factor authentication on the mainframe. What's going to happen? People don't know how to log on. It's ridiculous, and we need to erase that idea from the executives in our organization that our platform doesn't matter. They should be spending money on it. They should be looking at automating updates, doing intrusion detection, application monitoring, compliance there are all sorts of compliance regulations, and of course I'll talk more about that later.
Proactive, 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 right? You can't just sit and wait for the phone call. You have to be going looking for trouble in your environment and just looking for problems every day, right?
Just a couple of things we've been asked. Vanguard as a company, we're really a development shop. In all reality, 80% of our people are technologists, very small sales marketing group. We're driven by technology. That's our motto. That's the way we work. That's the kind of company we are. Brian and his team, they do a lot of skunk works development, if you like to call it. A client comes to us with a problem and they build the software. Then we take it to market. Kind of a different approach. But one thing that we've done to help our clients modernize the mainframe, which is a task that I think that we're all working on, is we built the capability for the compliance environment. We go out and we aggregate the results, we bring them back. Then when a new baseline has to be shipped out, we ship it across the baseline. And we do it in very large environments, 120, 140 LPARs, different countries, and it works and it works and it works. And then on top of that, we built some other capabilities. And could I get you just to talk about that for a second, Brian?
This is not a product pitch, so no.
Okay. But it's all part of the continuous monitoring. So let's say you go out, you look at your environment, you find a bunch of checks that you run your baseline, you get the results, you remediate it. Now what do you have to do? You have to lock it down so you never have to go back and visit those again. That's part of the modernization capability. So you have to apply tools without rip and replacing what you currently have, whether it's RACF, ACF2, or top secret, that you can go ahead and meet the requirements of the regulations that are coming down and being pressured by the audit groups. I don't know how many regulations there are now.
You know, I'm going to add one more thing, and I think we're out of time just about right.
Close.
I was going to add one more thing. Milt just tried to throw me a softball because I've been whispering at him up here the entire time. Talk about Sam. Talk about Sam. But he just tried to throw me that softball, and I kicked it back at him. So sorry about that, Milt. It's not a product pitch, but there is this idea that we need more application monitoring and malware detection on the mainframe. And that's one of the things that we're looking at, how to automate that, but not automate it in a silo, but allow you to do that across the entire ecosystem of the mainframe so that given a single server, you can go out and crawl through all the other mainframes, gather data about the applications that are running on the different mainframes, bring that data back and detect whether or not a change has been made to an executable, especially an executable that lives in an APF authorized library, and especially one that is linked AC1, so that we can at least inform you that there is a delta that you may need to be aware of. And that's another area of compliance that we on the mainframe have been sort of lacking over the last number of years. So thank you for that softball.
So last question for you guys. So we talked a lot in this session about hybrid cloud and how there's aspects of being able to access the mainframe from the cloud side. As that environment matures, kind of looking forward a bit and to the present as well, because there's a lot of use cases where that's in place, how do you see the world for mainframe security and the broader hybrid cloud security evolving?
So there's going to be a huge problem. And the huge problem is going to be, let's talk about a Kix transaction for a second. Let's say you've got a Kix application or some application that's using Kix to do a transaction into DB2. From the hybrid cloud perspective, the DB2 access of the data is relatively straightforward and easy, right? A relational database is a relational database is a relational database. But the idea of securing that transaction becomes more difficult in a hybrid environment because the first thing you have is a dissimilarity between the two security systems. So is that, am I answering your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it.
One of the areas that we were looking at, to be honest, was a company that did, well, exactly what Boss does. Unfortunately, somebody else got them. But it's an area of interest in that you can and will, and I'm sure you guys have seen that AWS is on a big kick here, right? They are very much going after the mainframe transactions and trying to send those over into the AWS area. They've had many announcements on this. Mainframe modernization is very much one of the things they're looking at. And one of the things I'm very interested in seeing, learning, and understanding is how they propagate that data over to the AWS and continue the same level of security, because as I see it right now, they haven't achieved that because they don't have transactional security. They have application security, and that makes it difficult. Remember, we all went down this road many years ago, right? Where all the different applications, SDSF, IMS, DB2, they all had their own internal security and were responsible for securing the transaction that was generated from them themselves. But we've gotten away from that because we understood that distributed security doesn't work. If you look at the AWS model and the Azure model and some of the others today right now, that's the approach they're taking, and that's very concerning to me.
Any other comments there before we wrap?
I just wanted to say that, just as an observation, as things move to the cloud, we don't have our hands around the data that we currently have. And by allowing it to go over into the cloud, we have even less, right? So I would think prior to putting the data in the cloud, we'd figure out where all our PII data is and know where that is, so that as we move out into the cloud, right, we're not putting that data at risk.
All right, great point. So I want to say thanks to you guys. Thanks for all coming up. And to everybody in the room. Just to make sure it's all clear, I think there's a great opportunity here, not just from the folks that came on stage. Mark obviously knows quite a bit about security himself. Al's here from Maintegrity. The Broadcom guys have a lot of security assets. You've got a wealth of knowledge in this room, and it's a lot of capabilities like that are going to help this industry make the transition to be able to benefit from things like public cloud going forward. So it's something that I think there's a great opportunity for you guys to get a lot of your questions answered over the next few days. So just to wrap for the day, some key takeaways. Obviously, we believe modernization without disruption is a winning strategy. We think that at Rocket, we've got a great portfolio to help solve a lot of these challenges. Hopefully, this presentation has been eye-opening. You learned some of the things that we do that maybe you didn't know that we did before. And also, ourselves with other partners in the ecosystem, we believe we can help you along that journey. There's a few other areas where you can get some information. We've got a booth obviously set up. We've got a session later today to talk more about open source and some of how it can be used on the mainframe, how you can pull it together. And then we've got another session dedicated to security at 1500 or 3 p.m. my time tomorrow. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming. Thanks for your time this morning. We really appreciate it and look forward to interacting with you over the course of the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.